But I just find it's freaking hilarious that a pirate company is basically suing another pirate company at this point. They're just a more disguised pirate company. And let me tell you, there's a goldmine of funny things in here too, like the most organic search terms, like the typical name of the website, and the fifth one being
I wish I could say I was more surprised to see nHentai under attack in US courts, but that would mostly be a lie. We've recently seen the consolidation of many official sources of anime, both digital and physical, a crackdown on manga leak culture, not that I'm a fan of leak culture, cease and desists presented to unauthorized fan art sold at conventions, and even more massive leaks of popular seasonal anime than ever seen before, followed by many of the top unofficial streaming services being shut down.
My personal speculation is that them pimping out these legal paid sites here at the end of their goodbye message kinda sends a clear sign that they were shut down, but again, that's just my speculation.
Are any of these related? It's difficult to say at this time, but some theorize, allegedly, that organizations like the ACE, or the Alliance for Creativity and Entertainment, which just so happens to include companies like Sony Pictures, Aniplex, Crunchyroll, AMC, Sentai, Haidai, you name it. Some are theorizing this may be a concerted and targeted effort by the corporations that make up this sort of super organization, as well as similar foreign organizations like the Content Overseas Distribution Association of Japan to crack down on anime piracy. And, I mean, that is kind of their job anyway.
Well, look what we have here, and a decade ago at that.
So yeah, I hate to cut myself off barely a minute into the video, but this seemed like a pretty wild revelation, albeit an unsurprising one. The ACE, CODA, and the MPAA are all working together, have been sharing information for as much as a decade at this point. Once again, unsurprising. The ACE, the global organization which was almost certainly responsible for the shutdown of Zoro.to, is primarily made up of streaming services and the like. CODA in Japan is made up almost entirely of production companies, not studios, except for Studio Ghibli, but that's kind of the exception that proves the rule. And it's worth pointing out, as usual here, that studios won't make any more money off of anti-piracy because studios don't make royalties. The production companies make the royalties. Yes, the companies that make up this anti-piracy group are the same production companies that invest all of the money so that they can earn all of the royalties. Studio funds for animators be damned. They intentionally cap the budgets for anime projects to ensure that they retain majority investment and therefore control over the projects and licensing, and to ensure that the number of production companies remains as small and as insular as possible. If they do take large outside investments, instead of funding larger standout productions with healthier budgets, they split the investments up into multiple projects and continue to perpetuate the same issues even as the anime industry grows like crazy and receives offers from investors all over the world. These companies are almost certainly the actual biggest reason that animators are so broke, but they want you to think that piracy is the problem, and they're throwing gobs of money that could be funding studios into these wasted anti-piracy efforts instead.
そうなるとこのアニメっていうのはどんなにヒットするのが分かってても上限予算天井が作られちゃうんだよ。いやこれまでお前ら1000万で作ってたんだから1000万で作れるだろう、これまでお前ら2000万で作ってたんだから2000万で作れるだろうと出資すべき金はいっぱいあるんだけども1本あたりのアニメーションには全然お金が増えない。そして横の方にお金が縦に流れて奥の方のスタッフまで行くんではなくて横に流れて上の方ばっかりで滞留することになってしまうわけだ。
Oh yeah? I bet you just don't want to support the
Can you shut the fuck up?
That's just how the anime industry works, but let's save that actual rant for a dedicated video. And back to the string of tangents that I'm calling a video. Now, conspiracy theory here. Allegedly. But if I wanted a monopoly, I sure would buy up all of the competition, both domestic and abroad, merge with or replace them, and then start cracking down more aggressively than ever before on the unofficial competition. Yes, that sure is, allegedly, what I would do if I were a company like Sony. Whoops! But that's all conspiracy theory. The hard reality, all we know so far, is that there have been an unignorable number of events like this recently.
As you can see, they ask how often you read on pirate sites if you would be willing to list the pirate sites.
No! The current ambient tone, in my opinion, is this. Official sources are consolidating, and piracy, unauthorized fan art, leaks, and even legitimate archive sources are coming under seemingly unprecedented attacks in the US. Allegedly. Enter PCR Distributing versus nHentai. What is it? How did we get here? And what ramifications might it have more broadly speaking? First off, nHentai is or perhaps I should say the, unofficial source of the sauce. A massive host of static hentai, adult manga content and fan art, doujin, doujinshi, whatever you want to call it, however you want to categorize it. It's the one. And if you've ever seen that mysterious little string of numbers and been confused,
The numbers, basically. What do they mean?
well, now you know.
And if you don't know, now you know.
PCR Distributing, on the other hand, is a relatively little-known California company who apparently operates through several video game, visual novel, and eroge or hentai brands such as J18 and Just USA.
If you want to know who PCR Distributing Company is, it's very well hidden. It's kind of like a ghost company that doesn't really exist, a shell company, if you will, that includes like these other bigger companies that we know, J-List and Jast.
Yo, cutting in here for just a second to say that I will be explaining their weird corporate structure to the best of my ability, but that will be much later on in the video when it's more relevant to the legal arguments being made by each party. Anyway, back to my boy, Lost Pause.
They do a lot of off-brand doujins themselves, hence the reason why they would specifically go after the biggest one out there. But here's the little interesting tidbit. They're like trying to say that they're not the pirate website, that they're like the good guys here. They're trying to go through legal means. They're basically pirates too. Well, maybe a little bit less bad because they're actually getting some licenses for all the other stuff out here. Let me tell you right now, they come from a shady past.
Yeah, a lot of history on that, Rod.
If you look at the Twitter account of PCR Distributing, you can clearly see that they're making parody t-shirts and selling them. Now, parody t-shirts, some of them fall under fair use, but if a company really hates you making money off of this, they can easily issue takedowns and take legal action for you monetizing the content. Some of them make sense for like parody stuff. However, this one out here, this Gurr Lagann t-shirt, direct quote, the glass is all there.
This is the color of his sunglasses when he's out during neutral lighting. Get your shit together!
The shine, literally everything from Gurr Lagann. That's not a parody anymore. That's just straight ripping them off. They even got like a Pokeball one in here as well. And let me tell you, I don't think the Pokemon company likes you making merch of their stuff. We all know that like cons and other things sell all these kinds of parody merch out there. The legality of it is questionable, but most of the companies don't really care if it's on a small con scale, but if they see you in an online store, you cannot hide. But it doesn't end there either. If you go onto the J-List website and see some of the doujins that they're selling, for $12.50 is this Nikkei Goddess of Victory unofficial fan book.
You fucking with me, right?
Yeah, that's, at this point, if that company went after them, they would be in big, big trouble. Obviously, that's not the only one out there. They got plenty of other parodies like Madoka, Blue Archive. I've seen ReZero in there too. There's a lot that are even referred to by name, which legally you're not supposed to name them. I highly doubt that they got permission from Nikkei, Blue Archive, all these other companies to sell these doujins. And just because you put parody on there doesn't really protect you, okay? You're using the character's likeness, the name of the actual thing itself. It's not really parody at this point. But we all know that doujins have this blanket of Japanese companies typically don't mind you publishing this stuff. Why? Because it's great advertisement. It falls in a legal gray area. They just won't go after you because it's good promotion. They know it's good promotion, but legally, it's still pirating. You're using someone else's copyright goods for profit. And hey man, I enjoy my parody works. I'm no saint. I love all this stuff out here. I mean, I make content on freaking anime stuff all the time, but I just find it's freaking hilarious that a pirate company is basically suing another pirate company at this point. They're just a more disguised pirate company. They're also trying to hide like what they were, like by saying that they weren't linked to J-List or Jast. They were just using a different company so no one would notice. But yeah, this is kind of a big freaking deal. This is the biggest Japanese doujin pirate site that is going to be taken down, a literally archive of all of these amazing titles in all the different languages, just like it may just disappear. All because of another greedy pirate company. I mean, you know, there's just a centipede that's eating itself.
And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
As far as we can tell, the dispute between the two parties began in October of last year, when nHentai attempted to confidentially settle claims of copyright infringement with PCR. Little is known about this attempted settlement, but nHentai was sent several DMCA compliant takedown notices and allegedly failed to remove any of the copyrighted works identified. Then, a few weeks ago, PCR obtained a DMCA subpoena requiring DNS, infrastructure, and cybersecurity company Cloudflare to comply and unmask the individuals behind the nHentai website. However, a few days after the subpoena was issued, on July 19th, lawyers representing nHentai argued that this attempt to reveal personal data should be quashed, that based on legal precedent, the subpoena should never have been granted to begin with. They argue, as the company has clearly positioned themselves, that Cloudflare is a, quote, mere conduit, who rarely stores content on its servers, merely facilitating the transmission of information between different parties. I quote, specifically, images from nHentai.net never pass through or are stored on Cloudflare servers in any form. nHentai therefore argues that DMCA subpoenas never should have been applicable, also citing several precedents, including the RIAA versus Verizon case of 2002, where courts have concluded that DMCA subpoenas don't apply to these, quote, mere conduit services. They further argue that the subpoena is too broad, the owners of the domain name are not the infringers, and that said subpoena would violate the owner's right to anonymous speech. As far as I know, this matter is still pending, but courts have, as recently as 2023, reiterated that these DMCA subpoenas do not apply to companies who do not store data. However, this now pending outcome could certainly have far-reaching consequences in loosely related matters, as to how much leeway organizations such as the previously mentioned Alliance for Creativity and Entertainment have in going after unofficial streaming and/or reading sites for non-adult entertainment as well. Anyway, more recently, on Friday, August 30th, PCR filed a complaint at a California federal court, moving forward with an all-out lawsuit against nHentai. The complaint describes nHentai as, and I quote, a widely visited platform for adult manga and doujinshi content, attracting over 79 million visits per month.
Damn! The funny thing here is, the visit duration is usually 10 minutes and 50 seconds.
I thought that was interesting.
That's how long people last on that website. The top countries that use it is the United States, which makes up the top demographic of about 25%.
That's pretty good, right?
The next one being Japan, and the Philippines being mentioned in there too as number 3. I mean, there's a lot of us. And let me tell you, there's a gold mine of funny things in here too, being like the most organic search terms being in here, like the typical name of the website, and the 5th one being Futanari manga. The thing that pops up the most in order to find this website. No. Being Futanari manga.
No! God, please, no! No!
Every day we stray further from God.
If you don't know what that is, bless you, man. Don't look it up, man.
And now back to your regularly scheduled
adult manga and doujinshi content, attracting over 79 million visits per month, and platform which, and I quote, hosts a vast collection of hentai works, including commercially produced content, much of which, based on information and belief, is shared without proper authorization from the owners, end quote. They further emphasize that nHentai is not a user-generated content website, does not offer user upload capability, and therefore is not entitled to safe harbors afforded to such platforms under Section 512 of the DMCA. PCR demands damages as compensation for several alleged and various forms of copyright violations.
Defendants are directly and knowingly involved in trafficking of thousands of pirated works, including 5 registered works of the plaintiffs.
You serious?
Things called Submission Eternal My Lady My Master, or the big hitter, Hey, let's do it. This one here, I'll squeeze you dry.
Apparently 4 million USD to be precise, but I couldn't seem to find a monetary figure in the actual text of the complaint. PCR furthermore seeks a broader injunction to shut down the site. Said injunction would also prohibit any further copyright violations against PCR and require the transfer of each and every URL available from nHentai.net. All domains and subdomains to the registrar of PCR's choosing.
So they're like, okay, now we're going after your entire website. Give us all of your content, your traffic. We're gonna take your identity and redirect it to us if we can't have all the money. We're suing you basically for everything and taking you down.
That's the biggest problem with this whole situation. They've basically destroyed their reputation. By taking down NH, a lot of people aren't too happy with Just and whatnot. Now granted, I would argue that there's gonna be a broader audience that has no clue what's going on here, nor do they care about NH. There's this argument that will be ongoing that a lot of people will see that what, Jazz is doing right here is actually good. There's a positive side of this whole thing, because a lot of the works they're putting out there and they're publishing and selling is getting money to the actual creators, whereas what NH is doing is supplying it for free. But the problem here, and a lot of people's gonna argue, and I will agree, they're taking down the entire NH website for the sake of 5 registered works.
Said injunction would require third parties, including search engines and the like, to block the domain in the United States. And that's basically where we are now as far as I can tell. The lawsuit was issued on August 30th and states that compliance must be met within 5 business days from the issuance of the order. And yet, as I write on the 9th, the only update I've seen is a screenshot allegedly from the nHentai Discord stating that the owner of the website had deleted the website's DNS records on their end, with a note stating that this may only be a temporary shutdown.
But there was also a follow-up announcement to the one I showed in the previous video from the same person, NayumiDev, saying that nHentai is back and that something was shifted from the registrar's side, which seems to be a normal thing that happens every once or twice a month, with this just being a coincidence if anything, since people could still access it with VPNs and other forms.
I just checked, and although I've seen complaints on and off for days, so far I'm still able to access the website on a US IP address, and I'm also still able to access its contents through a certain, no longer supported third-party reading app. Not that I would ever do such a thing. Anyway, I hope this all made sense and provided some clarity on the order and state of events. To be honest, it was really confusing trying to understand the details and make sense even of the timeline itself. There are only so many sources for this kind of info, and the legal jargon itself is beyond confusing and overly complicated. If ever there was a time for me to quote ReZero, it's now. My brain trembles. Now, personally speaking, legality be damned, I hope that nHentai comes out on top.
Put your hands up. I want to.
Either way, I do feel confident we'll still have access to the content, as the lawsuit only ever mentions nHentai.net specifically, and only God knows how many alternate extension mirror sites and alternative sites in general exist.
Now, I don't know if this is actually going to go through because they're using a US court system to probably go after some company that's in some other country that has different laws and different things that they go through. Can they really enforce what's going to go on here? Or they're trying to go after the US corporations that, do business with them in the overseas to try and shut them down through like this middleman company out here. So maybe something can happen. I don't know.
Everything else I'm going to say is speculation from both my side and the owner of the Discord side. nHentai is basically self-sufficient, so even if the website owner gets arrested, it would still be up. And even if the website does get taken down, the owner would have to pay a large sum of money and would probably call for donations. The worst case scenario will be that it just gets replaced by another site, saying that nHentai used to attract many data hoarders. Though the most likely scenario now is that there's going to be a purge of a large amount of dojins on the site. And this isn't the first time there's been a scare about nHentai shutting down, with one in more recent times happening at the beginning of the year. People started saving their favorites, and the nHentai Reddit even started enforcing a sourcing etiquette. And the only reason the Discord server brings this up is the sheer amount of people saying it's the end of the world, even their own reaction, when it's really not.
November 11th and still fapping, ha 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 ha, wait, it's November? Oops.
So anyway, in the time between finishing the original video, getting hit by Hurricane Helene, and getting other projects mostly caught back up, I've seen one major update, which I'll be reading about on TorrentFreak.com. Gonna keep this simple, albeit a bit long perhaps, and mostly just read from the article and the included email screenshots, skipping all recap scenes of course, and I'll be adding just a little bit of input at the end before wrapping this up with my original concluding thoughts. And with no further ado, the newest update article, Sans Recaps, reads, nHentai fights back in piracy lawsuit. Quote, Rightsholder gave permission. A copyright lawsuit between popular adult site nHentai and the Californian company PCR Distributing has taken an interesting turn. nHentai requested a protective order in which it argues that PCR granted written permission to use its content. The rights holder also contemplated running ads on the site, nHentai says. And skipping a bunch of recap and paraphrasing, we move on to early discovery. PCR didn't waste any time renewing its earlier efforts to unmask the operators of nHentai. The rights holder filed a motion for early discovery, requesting subpoenas to obtain information from Namecheap, Cloudflare, and Lanato Solutions. The requested information includes names, addresses, login information, billing records, server logs, IP addresses, email exchanges, and IP login information related to the nHentai.net accounts. I quote, Plaintiff seeks the identities of defendants, the owners and operators of nHentai, who have taken measures to conceal their identity, PCR wrote, noting that the subpoenas would help to establish relevant detail. nHentai swiftly opposed this request, citing serious privacy concerns. The site doesn't want its login information and financial records, including complete credit card numbers, to be exposed. As a further precaution, the site also asked the court for a protective order to ensure that if early discovery is granted, none of the identifying information will end up in public. While this response was expected from the site, nHentai's memorandum adds new information that puts the copyright infringement complaint in a new light. According to the defense, PCR previously gave the site permission to use its content. nHentai's attorney says that a representative of plaintiff's brands gave written permission via email to use J18 Publishing's content. In the same email, it also inquired about running paid ads on the site. I quote, "Plaintiff has repeatedly given nHentai.net permission in writing to use plaintiff's content. Plaintiff expressed on multiple occasions that it does not want nHentai.net to stop using its content. nHentai informed the court. I quote, "In fact, plaintiff wants nHentai.net to use it so that plaintiff can amass even more money from the sexually explicit materials plaintiff sells. Plaintiff has even offered to pay nHentai.net to run ads on its website to accomplish this goal." End quote. One of the emails in question, posted below, clarifies that, and I quote, "This isn't a takedown request or a DMCA, offering a collaboration instead." And I'll just read the email itself, quickly pointing out that this alleged October 2020 email's subject line actually appears to read, "Permission granted to host our content, J18 Publishing." Kind of funny, will be relevant later, obviously. But anyway, I quote, "To whom it may concern, right from the beginning, I want to stress that this isn't a takedown request or a DMCA. I've spent enough time selling the high Cs myself to know that they're pointless and nobody listens to them anyway. My name is David, though you might know me better as Rotoscopic. I'm a scanlator, now serving as the managing editor at the manga publisher J18, the publisher of manga like 40 Hara's Ayapon, Sato Kuuki's Netosis Dojinshi, and a couple others. We also work closely with Jast, visual novel publisher of games like Steins Gate, You and Me and Her, and Sadistic Blood. We know people don't always have the money to buy official releases, or just don't want to pay for them. We know the only reason that any market at all for anime or manga exists in the West is because of piracy, so we're not interested in trying to fight any sites about this stuff. However, a few months ago, we were able to strike a deal with the admin over at nHentai.
Mama always said, helping hand is a helping hand, clean or dirty.
About what to do about properties to which we have the rights being uploaded to their site. When the raw scans, scanlations, or rips of properties to which we own or manage the rights get uploaded, we're able to slap a banner over the top, like so. I've attached 2 examples of what that looks like to this email. The banners aren't meant to be intrusive. They don't move, they don't try to shame or make you feel bad.
Gonna be okay.
They're just there so that fans who want to own physical, uncensored English language versions of the doujinshi they love so much can purchase them. We try to make it as easy and convenient as possible for people to get them, and we just want to be able to give them the chance. Is there any chance we'd be able to do something like this on nHentai? We don't want to try to take down any of our galleries. We just want people to have a simple, safe, and easy way of getting to our site where they can buy physical copies of the comics they love. If this is something that could possibly happen, I'd be delighted to hear back from you. We already have a lot of banners prepared that we've been using on nHentai, and we would be happy to know that all of nHentai's devoted browsers now also have the option to support doujinshi creators through us while being able to own physicals of their favorite artists' uncensored work. I'll be looking forward to your response. Thanks for hearing me out, and I hope that you're staying safe and staying happy. Best, David Goldberg, Just Create, Managing Editor. End quote. In another email, also cited in the legal paperwork, PCR's representative sent a spreadsheet of over 3,300 links, which nHentai was permitted to share. In yet another email, the company indicates that it was considering paying nHentai for banner ads. This alleged email chain, with correspondence from a different employee from J18, starts on
September
15th, 2021, and seems to conclude on November 2nd, 2021. Gavin Wink at J18 initially writes, "Hello there, Gavin Wink. New marketing hire here at J18. I know we've talked briefly about running ads on your sites, but the talks fell through. Well, I'd like to open that line of discussion again, if possible. How do I go about purchasing ad space on your site?" Mal at nhentai.net responds, "Hey there, thanks for your interest. Do you have a budget and or any types of ads/positions you're interested in testing/purchasing? Gavin then responds, "Got 2 things in mind. First, I'd like to run banner ads on uploads of our manga that link back to the official store where you can buy them. I don't want to take down the uploads of our titles, just to give people an easy option for purchasing them if they do enjoy. So those would be banners on specific pages. Second, we're running a sale here soon, so I was wondering about shorter term ad space on general areas of the site, and how much that would cost. It'll probably run for about a month or so. That's the current thinking anyway. Any estimates on those two propositions? And in what appears to be the final bump in the email chain, Gavin writes, any word back on this?
What's leave me on red mean?
And continuing the article once again. This week, PCR responded to nHentai's opposition and the newly revealed details. According to the rights holders, there's nothing that should prevent the court from granting the subpoenas. I quote, "Plaintiff is not seeking information about end users, their credit card numbers, or any of the parade of horribles cited by defendant. All of the information sought is limited to information about the operators of this website," PCR notes. The response doesn't dispute that the cited emails are legitimate, but even if they are, that doesn't establish a license or consent to use PCR's copyrighted content. I quote, "Here, to support their non-exclusive license, defendants merely cite invitations to bargain and prior negotiations. Under California law, an invitation to bargain is not an offer." End quote. In addition, PCR points out that after the unauthenticated emails, it sent several DMCA takedown notices that were ignored. This is why PCR decided to go to court, hoping to identify the operators. I quote, "Plaintiff's brief also, ... ignores the fact that before this case was filed, plaintiff sent multiple DMCA takedown notices and recently served a DMCA subpoena in an attempt to identify defendant, thus dispensing with the notion that there was some sort of permission PCR writes. The court has yet to rule on the motion for early discovery, but the details released so far suggest that this case may present some intriguing twists and turns as it progresses towards trial. And thus concludes the
Over 1 month later.
nHentai's representatives did, however, put forward a few other legal arguments. I'd say they're essentially taking every legal argument that has a chance of winning or buying them time and throwing them all at the wall to see what sticks. Way to put up a fight though. Most similar websites would probably just roll over.
It's not actually often that you have these piracy sites actually fight back. And I think the main reason why is because, yes, they have actually requested to find the information about the actual owners of the website. And so I do feel like there's seemingly a necessity the owners of nHentai have to actually fight against this.
For the sake of simplicity, I'll just play a few short clips from Otaku Spirit's latest update on the topic, where he goes over some of the other arguments laid out in the submitted legal document.
Of course, the usual, I am not a lawyer. I'm just going to state my thoughts about this whole process here based on my limited knowledge of the court systems, but I do find this extremely fascinating because yes, nHentai has decided to file an objection.
Your Honor, I object!
And why is that, Mr. Reed?
Because it's devastating to my case!
They decided before it gets into the whole process here, they're filing a motion to dismiss this entire thing. First, NH argues that it isn't clear whether PCR is actually the author of all the works. Some official copyright registration records show Just USA as the author. Although PCR claims it operates under Just USA brand, the defendants argue that PCR is a separate company and has not provided sufficient evidence to demonstrate that they possess the necessary licenses or assignments for the copyrighted works. They state public records for Just USA show that it is entirely separate status as a stock corporation with what appears to be a different ownership, i.e. no overlapping directors, offices, addresses, etc. from those shown on PCR's corporate filings, the motion to dismiss alleges. The defense also brings up another copyright concern. They point out that it's not clear what is actually copyrighted. The NH website actually mostly shares images, but some copyright registrations refer to literary works which might not cover images in question. They state under copyright law, literary works specifically exclude images, they argue. This is critical because plaintiffs not demonstrated any right to sue for copyright infringement as to the images. They also further say that the timing of the lawsuit allege that copyright infringements are barred as the statute of limitation has allegedly passed. This is interesting. In addition, NH believes that some of the copyrights were registered years after the associated images were distributed on the website. This means that copyright for the works were not registered when they were originally uploaded. In such an instance, the law mandates the plaintiff is not entitled to statutory damages or attorney fees as to this copyright.
Yes, science!
Plaintiff also cannot show entitlement to statutory damages and or attorney fees on the other basis such as section 412 as the works are not copyrighted within 3 months of publication. The motion to dismiss adds.
Cutting in here again for just a second to clarify, because I think a lot of people, including Andrew here, actually misunderstood this point. They are making this specific argument not to claim that they don't need to take anything down. They are making this argument to point out that they are exempt from having to pay statutory damages for a period when the current copyright owner actually did not have a legal claim in place. If they had not yet filed a copyright claim for the works, why would nHentai have to pay anything out to them for that claim during the period before they filed? PCR Distributing can't just retroactively claim statutory damages for a period before it even owned the rights to distribute said materials.
Alright! It's the time wizard!
Especially if, as nHentai's representatives claim, the plaintiff didn't even have their documentation in order on time. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but as I understand this, what they're referring to is the fact that you actually have to file the requisite documentation by the proper date for your ownership to actually mean anything functionally. Once again, I'm not a lawyer. I could also be misunderstanding this. I could also be confused. But I think this seems a lot more accurate than how I've seen it represented in other places. Hopefully I'm making sense. Anyway, back to the video.
I might be reading that wrong. Moving on. Given this alleged permission, as well as other arguments put forth in the motion, NH believes that PCR has no legitimate claim for copyright infringement. Therefore, the case should be dismissed. They also claim that if they don't dismiss it, they want to release claims to nh.to, which they claim has not affiliated. Sure. Sure.
Am I a joke to you?
Do I amuse you?
Do you feel blame? Are you mad? Do you feel like Bob's referendum?
Apparently, the hearing for the motion of protective order is scheduled for February 12th. PCR Distributing is ordered to file opposition by January 22nd. So this is going to keep going. We'll see where it goes from here. But again, I thought it was very interesting.
Okay, so let's attempt to summarize and clarify some of this, because I've stared at this long enough to think that I understand and then feel confused all over again. And I definitely think that there is plenty of confusion floating around already. 1. The plaintiff, the entity who is actually going after nHentai, is PCR Distributing. PCR Distributing claims to operate under JAST USA and therefore has rights to the works being disputed. However, nHentai's representatives claim that there is reason to believe this might be untrue, that JAST USA is the actual registered author of some or all of said works, and that PCR Distributing's position granting them the aforementioned rights is in question. It has allegedly not been properly backed up by the submitted legal documentation of their corporate structure. 2. JAST USA, alleged owner of PCR Distributing, is also sister company to J18 Publishing.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
Because I'm an idiot. Happy?
Okay, so JList's LinkedIn page lists them as the parent company of JAST USA, and there is an old deleted tweet on JList's Twitter account that states that J18 Publishing is the sister company of JList. So at least as far as I understand it, JList is the parent company, J18 is referred to as their sister company, and another company called JBox is referred to as a division of JList. And according to what I was able to find, PCR Distributing themselves are actually what is known as a DBA, or a doing business as. A DBA, doing business as, also known as a trade name, allows a business to operate under a name other than its registered name, used mostly for branding purposes. So for all intents and purposes, PCR Distributing is JAST USA.
Allegedly!
As far as I understand it. It's kind of confusing, and it's very hard to find concrete information on the structure of this company.
And now back to your regularly scheduled...
The big bombshell was, of course, nHentai's representatives claimed that they were given permission to continue hosting said content. The emails that they claim provide them permission, however, specifically come from representatives of J18 Publishing, not the alleged owner JAST USA or the alleged doing business as PCR Distributing, but the sister company of the parent company. Gavin, representative of J18 Publishing in the second email, does have a JAST USA email, but that's probably just an old email from before he had this new position. There's obviously the question of whether the sister company had the rights to give in the first place, pertaining specifically to the works being disputed here, but it's also worth pointing out that even if this permission is considered legally binding, there would obviously be questions, for example, about how long they had been granted said permission for. 3. nHentai's representatives also claim that PCR Distributing cannot claim statutory damages for a period when nHentai hosted the content, but PCR Distributing had yet to gain a claim to the material. They also claim on this note that PCR Distributing did not have the legal documentation that would provide them with ownership or publishing rights and therefore a claim to statutory damages. They claim that they did not have this legal documentation in order and submitted to US copyright authorities by the required date, on top of claiming that they haven't proven their position as doing business as Just USA, the alleged actual owner of the disputed works. And to wrap the summary up, they also claim that it's unclear what is copyrighted, with a distinction being made between the images hosted on their site and the aforementioned literary works. But this feels like pure semantics if I'm being honest.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
I just find it far less compelling than the other arguments. And of course, the whole nHentai.to thing is just totally absurd. With that said, they use all of the aforementioned arguments to claim that the case should be thrown out before moving to an actual trial. Alright, one last little note for clarification before I send this monstrosity off to be viewed by no one because it's a complete freaking mess of tangents. I've seen a few people saying that there seem to be contradictions within the arguments nHentai's representatives are making here, saying on one hand that plaintiff doesn't have the rights to sue them for these licenses, and saying on the other hand that plaintiff granted them permission. I've seen a few people saying that these kind of contradict each other, but I think that they're confused once again. Once again, I could be confused, but I think that they're confused. What nHentai's representatives are arguing is that PCR Distributing has not been proven to legally exist as a DBA or as essentially the same corporation as Just USA, the actual owner of many of these licenses. And on the other hand, they're saying that we also got permission from representatives of J18, a sister company or division of the actual parent company at the top. So it's not really a contradiction to say, hey, this DBA, this shell company who doesn't really exist, doesn't have the legal paperwork to prove that they have the licenses. Meanwhile, we got permission from a division of the actual head honcho parent company. So who the fuck is PCR Distributing to come suing us? That's what they're arguing, and I do not see a contradiction in that if both claims are true. Anyway, God rest this video in the algorithm. And make of all that what you will. Just some scattered thoughts here, but if I'm being honest, I have to say that this is where it really feels like the semantics themselves are intensifying in the arguments. But I guess that was kind of inevitable, and it was nonetheless interesting for me at least. Ironically, I have to say that, assuming these emails are real and ignoring the lawsuit itself, this is kind of based on J18's part, just straight up offering the pirate site a sort of quote-unquote collaboration, and it does really make me wonder why negotiations allegedly fell through. In my mind, this could kind of be the ideal situation, at least in an ideal world, where official services and pirate/archive sites have a sort of symbiotic relationship that gives everyone an official option to support, but also offers unofficial options which can better guarantee true archival without the issues of modern profit incentives or exclusive rights, ass-backwards copyright, and license laws in a world which does sometimes truly feel like that dreaded late-stage capitalism meme. At the same time, I also can't exactly blame sites like this for having trepidation about getting too close to the official publishers, but I don't know. This just gets more and more complicated with each piece of information I collect, and I myself of course have trepidation about leaning too far into my own biases. Those are just some scattered thoughts once again, so don't take anything to heart. I don't necessarily know what to make of these strange new revelations, and I of course welcome any thoughts you guys might have. And back to my original, and far more opinionated, final thoughts.
Release me from this torment.
But it's difficult to ignore the potential ramifications that precedent set in this lawsuit and the apparently still pending DMCA subpoenas targeted at Cloudflare could have on regular anime and manga pirate sites as well. If the subpoena is allowed and the lawsuit goes through, I could certainly see that turning the tide on the precedent set in defense of similar non-adult websites as well. And this might give organizations like the Alliance for Creativity and Entertainment more leeway to go after unofficial alternatives to the, in my opinion, utterly atrocious and anti-media ownership official streaming platforms that we currently put up with. If you find that language hyperbolic, go check out my video on Crunchyroll and media ownership and see if your mind changes. And on that note, I don't know if you've seen the folks memeing about how this is akin to the burning of the Library of Alexandria, but assuming this does wind up being a landmark dispute that sets new precedents, I might actually completely, not even memeing, unironically agree. Here's the thing. Real archiving is not done by corporations with profit motives. Because when the profits dry up, so do the servers. And it's certainly not going to be done by the US government. It's too busy borrowing money from our future to control us, to preserve art after all. Like it or not, real preservation is done by pirates. They're the only ones you can depend on to archive everything under the sun, without exception and without rest. And if they make some money along the way, sure, I absolutely feel bad that the artists themselves aren't making it. But I'm not sure I do feel so bad that the pirates are, because I'm not actually convinced that anyone else is willing to do the work.
And I'm not saying, you know, nHentai is like the best, most angelic website out there. We know what it is. It's a pirate website. We all know. For most of us in the US, we can't get this content. It's not sold here in the US. It's in Japan only. This is the only way we can really see this stuff.
With a ton of stuff that's not even legally available, is stuff that just people pick up, you know, doujinshis or whatever at a con or whatever, and they submit it there. These things are not available to the general public. You would never be able to find published works of it. But for 5 works, the entire website's being destroyed.
In a world where proper art preservation is the exception and not the rule, in some cases, arguably illegal, I say piracy is basically a moral obligation.
My idea of game preservation, I know companies want you to think it's buying the Blu-rays, buying the DVDs, buying the discs, buying the PS5 discs and keeping them in your closet. That's not real game preservation. Real game preservation is backing it up onto hard drives, backing it up onto servers, sharing it, pirating it, as some people would say. It's like digital replication infinitely. Time and time again, history has shown those are the people who really preserve things, not the guy who has PT on his PS4 in his living room. It's the guy
Dude, that's me. I've got PT on my PS4.
Yeah, but the guy who jailbroke his PS4, got PT off there, digitally backed it up, and spread it across the internet, that guy preserved the game.
And anyway, if sites like nHentai go down, where else am I gonna read masterpieces like Simpulsive Gamers?
Finna bust a nut. Finna bust a nut. Finna bust a nut tonight.